Is there anything I can do to thank you?" With those words from her, I took advantage and made a single request. When I told her what it was, she blushed slightly and looked down. Then she said quietly, "I have no reason to refuse." Her eyes were a bit moist, and her voice was trembling. "I am Mike Johnson, 30 years old. I'm laid back and also a ridiculously timid person. I've had opportunities for promotion at this age, but I'm not suited for management due to my personality, so I've turned them down. I'm happy to continue living peacefully as a regular employee. My parents back in rural Nebraska are rushing me to get married, asking if I found someone nice, but unfortunately, there is no one I would consider marrying, and I haven't had a significant other in a long time. The only thing that comforts me, a workaholic, isn't a woman, but the houseplants that are gradually increasing in my room. At first, I just wanted some greenery in my room, but as I placed the plants and took care of them, seeing them thrive, I realized it calmed my soul. Now my room is filled with plants. Taking pictures of the plants is also one of my joys. So, while it's not glamorous, my personal life is peaceful and my work is going well. However, there was a recent change at work. A female colleague named Susan Miller transferred to my department. Susan is 35, 5 years older than me. She has a good sales record and is rumored to be a rising star among her peers. In addition, being the most beautiful woman in the company is a well-known story. Beautiful and competent, she has it all, but for some reason, she isn't married. Maybe she's out of everyone's league, so the male employees can't even approach her. I won't lie and say I'm not interested. But we've been in different departments, and I haven't talked to her much. Like me, Susan seems to struggle with socializing. She gets her work done officially, but I've never seen her chatting with others. My coworkers also don't know how to approach her, so there's a wall between Susan and everyone else. As we'll be working together, I hope we can at least make small talk. That was during a usual weekend when I was admiring my houseplants at home. I was transplanting potted plants on the balcony when a single piece of paper fluttered down from above. I picked it up, thinking it was something, but it turned out not to be paper but a thin paper bag containing plant seeds. It probably came flying down from the floor above, but should I return it or not? While I was wondering what to do, the doorbell rang. I thought I knew who dropped the bag, so without checking who it was, I opened the door. But the next moment, I froze on the spot. It seemed the other person was the same, as we stood silently facing each other for a while. "Susan," to my soft murmur, the person in front of me answered yes. The one who rang my doorbell was my attractive senior at work, Susan, whom I had recently begun working with. Her hair, usually tied up at work, was loosely hanging over her shoulders. Perhaps because it was the weekend, and she was dressed in a relaxed dress, without her usual glasses. I dropped the bag of seeds and came to get it. "I had no idea that you lived downstairs," Susan said, seemingly surprised. "It's not unreasonable." I was surprised too. Such coincidences do happen, don't they? Later, Susan told me that she had moved into this apartment building 3 months ago. Since Susan and I had different off-duty times before transfer, we hadn't run into each other. And I tend to stay at home on my days off. While we were both surprised by the coincidence, I returned the bag of seeds to Susan. "Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I was planting seeds in the planters on the balcony and accidentally let the bag of seeds be carried away by the wind." I was glad to hear that, because I felt a sense of familiarity. I was also transplanting pots on the balcony. "You like gardening, growing plants too, Susan?" "Yes, I love houseplants and keep them in my room." "Oh, maybe that one is in my room too." Susan pointed at the small houseplant I had placed by the entrance. From there, we talked about the potted plants we were growing. I was surprised to learn that Susan lived upstairs, but even more surprised that she, who always seemed to put up walls and worked methodically, was talking so much and so lively. Especially when talking about plants, she had such a soft and gentle expression. Seeing her like that, I thought she was adorable. There seems to be a gap between her work and private life, and I think that's what attracted me to her. From that day on, Susan and I began to communicate privately as well. Although most of our conversation was about plants, but it was a lot of fun exchanging information about plant shops and growing methods through messaging. One day, she expressed interest in a large houseplant in my room, so I invited her over. Knowing that we were only going to talk about hobbies, I was still nervous to invite a woman into my room. As a thank you for inviting her, she brought some sweets. The way she can be so thoughtful makes her even more wonderful, I thought, and I probably had romantic feelings for her. I began to realize my feelings. I was staring absent-mindedly at Susan in my room when she muttered, "Camera. My SLR camera is sitting in my line of sight." I do a bit with the camera, too. I take pictures of houseplants and post them on my blog. It's fun, and it's a way to connect with fellow plant lovers. Really now? She said that, but she seemed more fascinated by the plants in the room than the camera. After privately talking with Susan for a while, I suddenly received a request from a beautiful colleague. The beautiful colleague, of course, is Susan. "I'm going on a business trip for a month. Can you stay at my place during that time?" I was indeed puzzled by this. Just because we'd been talking more didn't mean I could stay at her place. Seeing my troubled face, Susan continued with a smile. "I'm sorry for springing this on you. I was half joking about the living part. You don't have to stay. But while I'm away, I'd like you to take care of my plants. Some can be left alone for a while, but others need frequent care. This is my first time being away so long, and I'm really at a loss. My parents live out of state, so they can't come help." I felt relieved upon hearing that. Apparently, she doesn't have friends she can casually ask to take care of them. I know what kind of plants she has in her room, and I understand how to take care of them. Plus, Susan's house is right above mine, so it's easy to get there. But isn't it careless to let a man into a woman's apartment? I thought, but she reassured me by saying, "You're the only one I can ask. I'd trust you." I was pleased with those words. It wasn't that she was asking just anyone, but that she trusted me specifically to ask for my help. She persisted, and in the end, I agreed. I did it because she was in trouble, nothing more. It's definitely not because I was asked by the beautiful colleague I have a soft spot for, looking up to me. The night Susan went on her business trip, I, who had been entrusted with the spare key, headed to her house. Entering a woman's home when she wasn't there was a first for me, and I was filled with trepidation. Inside the room, there were as many houseplants or more as in my room. Each leaf was lush, and the stems were strong. It showed that she was taking good care of them. Previously, Susan had mentioned that she collected a lot of books about plants. She had told me that I could look at anything on her bookshelf when I visited during her trip, so I immediately checked to see what books were there. That's when I noticed a handwritten notebook mixed in with the books. Upon flipping through it, I realized it was Susan's notebook summarizing the characteristics and care methods of her plants. From the number of books and the contents of her notebook, I could tell that Susan wasn't just fond of plants, but was studying them to take care properly. I've grown various plants, starting with houseplants, but I never really studied them in depth. But as I looked through Susan's notebook, I began to enjoy it, and I became engrossed in reading her plant books and her compiled notebook in her room while she was away on business. I learned many new things, and it was exciting to have knowledge pouring into me. It was interesting and stimulating for me. I thought I was just going to take care of her plants in her place, but I ended up enjoying thrilling days beyond my imagination. When Susan came back, She thanked me for taking care of them, but I told her that I should be the one thanking her. I learned a lot and had even more fun growing plants. Hearing my words, Susan gave me a soft smile. My heart raced at her soft smile, softer than I had ever seen. No, I should be the one thanking you, Green Man. When she said that, my heart skipped a beat. Green Man is the name I use when posting pictures of plants on my blog. I write about their features and how to grow them, almost like a diary. I started it just to keep a record for myself, but sometimes I get comments from fellow plant enthusiasts. I've been writing since I was young because it allows me to connect with people who share the same hobby. I had told Susan about writing the blog, but I hadn't told her that I write under the name Green Man. I wonder how she knew. As I was thinking this, Susan told me a story about something that happened at a company she used to work for. It was a so-called toxic workplace that imposed a harsh environment with bullying, unpaid overtime, and no holidays. Apparently, she became physically and mentally worn down because of it. That was when I discovered Green Man's blog. I've always liked plants but never had the time to grow them myself. The pictures of plants on the blog and the peaceful diaries of living with them were healing for me. I read it almost every day. I had no idea Susan had such a past. I've also been in a situation where I became depressed because my relationship with my boss at my previous company didn't go well. Growing plants was part of my therapy for depression. I was so weakened, I sent a message to Green Man on his blog, "Work is hard, and I don't have time to be healed by plants." And he replied, "Quit your job, and let's be healed by plants together." Hearing that, my memory came flooding back. I had indeed had such an exchange on my blog. Since she was talking about how hard it was to go to work, I couldn't see it as someone else's problem. I myself couldn't quit my job due to anxiety, but once I quit, I realized that both my mind and body were becoming healthier. There's no need to be crushed by the company, so if it's tough, it's better to get out early. That's what I thought. Back then, I was told by my parents and those around me to try a little harder, but no matter how hard I tried, the situation didn't get any better. The first person to tell me that I could quit was Green Man, and I was glad, and I felt really relieved. So I quit the company right away. I wanted to send a thank you message, but I left a dark message, so it felt awkward to send another one. But I'm really glad I quit my old job. It's all thanks to you, Mike. Thank you. No, I also wondered how the person who gave me that message was doing. It was you, Susan. I'm relieved. How did you figure out that Green Man was me? She seemed to have guessed by looking at the cameras and desk calendar when she came to my room. I hadn't noticed, but apparently, the things in my room and the desk calendar were often captured in the photos I posted on my blog. She still didn't seem to be sure. But when I wrote on my blog that I was taking care of a friend's plants for a month while she was on a business trip, that seemed to be the deciding factor. I'm grateful that she still checks my blog, but I feel a little anxious, thinking that a woman who has feelings for me is reading it. What if I wrote something strange? But other than that, I felt nothing but joy. A person who was troubled like me was able to move forward because of my words. And she has become a fellow plant lover. I felt that the fact that my blog, which started as a hobby, had become something I could push people to do, would give me confidence. I am so grateful to you. Thanks to you, I now have time to be healed by plants, and my days are very peaceful. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything you want? At those words, I jumped at the chance. I thought it was a chance to convey my feelings. I don't know if I'll have an opportunity like this to talk at length again. I want you to let me express my feelings. I like you. The time I spend with you feels good, and I was happy to see a smile that I don't often see at work. I'm glad you entrusted me with taking care of the plants, and I liked your studiousness. It made me recognize again that it's just like you. I want to date you, but I don't want to use the word thanks. So, if you don't want to, please refuse me clearly. That's my request." Susan listened to my confession with a surprised expression. But when she finished listening, she firmly responded, "Why would I refuse? It's more of a reward for me, since I feel the same way." Her cheeks were slightly red as she said this. I didn't care what I looked like. I was so happy I struck a victory pose. Seeing me, she burst out laughing. Our relationship was going well, and there were changes at work too. She had been consulting me about communicating better with her colleagues. It seemed that her shyness was the cause of the perceived barrier between her and those around her. So I suggested to her that we put some houseplants in the office and make it a talking point. I had heard before that colleagues wanted something green, something soothing in the office. With everyone's consent, Susan and I took the initiative to place and take care of indoor plants. The cool-looking Susan turned out to love plants, and she became very talkative about them. Colleagues started talking to her more often. Susan herself seemed to enjoy the conversations with others. Her smiles increased at the office, and I couldn't be happier. "Mike, you always push my back, thank you." Her smile, now, is my greatest comfort. I used to think that only plants could heal. I've found a comfort greater than plants, and I'm deeply and truly content.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons. leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.